In 1155 BCE, the most powerful man on earth was killed, not on a battlefield, not by a foreign army, inside his own palace, by people he trusted. For 3,000 years, no surviving official inscription clearly described how he died. His temples recorded his victories. His inscriptions celebrated his reign. His priests preserved his image as a living god. None of them recorded how he died. Then in 2012, scientists placed his mummy inside a CT scanner. And beneath 3,000 years of linen wrappings, they found a wound across his throat so deep it reached the bone. His name was Ramesses III, and what the surviving evidence reveals about how he died and the conspiracy that surrounded his death is darker than anything carved on the walls of his temples. Every word you are about to hear is sourced from surviving papyri, forensic CT evidence, and DNA analysis. This is not mythology. This is what they buried. To understand what happened inside that palace, you first need to understand what was happening outside it. By 1180 BCE, the ancient world was dying. Historians call it the Late Bronze Age collapse. Civilizations that had stood for centuries, the Hittites, the Mycenaeans, the kingdoms of the Levant, all collapsed within decades of each other. Trade networks that connected the entire Mediterranean, gone. Egypt survived, but survival came at a cost that the monuments never recorded. The economic strain was real and documented. Government supplies became harder to manage. Resources that once flowed reliably through the empire began to slow, and the people who felt it first were the ones building the pharaoh's tomb. In the desert west of Thebes sat a village called Deir el-Medina. The people who lived there were not ordinary laborers. They were the most specialized craftsmen in the ancient world. Sculptors, painters, scribes, entrusted with carving the sacred walls of royal tombs. They knew every passage, every hidden chamber, every secret in the Valley of the Kings. And they worked under one condition: monthly rations of grain, oil, fish, and beer. Not bonuses, their wages, the only thing keeping their families alive. In the 29th year of Ramesses III, approximately 1158 BCE, those rations stopped arriving. What happened next is recorded on a document that survived 3,000 years, the Turin Strike Papyrus, now held in the Egyptian Museum. According to this papyrus, the workers of Deir el-Medina put down their tools, walked off the royal construction site, and marched toward the mortuary temples of Thebes, demanding to be heard. This is the earliest documented labor strike in recorded human history. The papyrus records their exact words: "We are hungry. 18 days have already elapsed this month." Officials attempted to negotiate. Emergency grain was distributed, 46 sacks of wheat, barely half of what was owed. The workers went back because they had no choice. But something had shifted. For the first time in documented Egyptian history, workers who built the pharaoh's eternal tomb had forced a negotiation with the pharaoh's own government. And inside the palace walls, people with far more dangerous ambitions were watching. Ancient Egyptian pharaohs maintained large royal households, multiple wives, dozens of children. Each wife's fate and the fate of her children depended entirely on one outcome: whether her son was chosen as heir. Most accepted this. Most waited. One did not. Her name was Dia, a secondary wife of Ramesses III. What we know about her comes almost entirely from a single document, the Judicial Papyrus of Turin, an 18-foot-long court record purchased at a local market in Egypt in the 1820s, now held at the Museo Egizio in Turin, Italy. This papyrus documents the investigation and trials that followed a conspiracy against the king, and it names Tie as the principal figure behind the plot. According to the court record, Tie's goal was to remove Ramesses III from the throne and replace him with her son, Pentawa. To accomplish this, she recruited from inside the palace itself. The papyrus names a court official called Pebekamen as the organizer. It names harem women, palace servants, military officers, scribes, over 40 individuals connected to the royal household, people with access, people with knowledge, people close enough to act. The conspiracy grew through the most protected institution in Egypt, the royal palace itself, and then it reached into territory that made the court record extraordinary. It reached into magic. To modern audiences, magic sounds like fiction. To ancient Egyptians, it was not. Sacred ritual texts, protective spells, and ceremonial practices existed alongside medicine and government as documented parts of Egyptian life. The Judicial Papyrus of Turin records something remarkable. Members of the conspiracy are accused of using magical practices against the king. The papyrus specifically names a man called Prekamenef, identified in the court record as a practitioner of ritual arts within the palace. According to the papyrus, he and other conspirators obtained ritual texts. They created wax figures, effigies representing targets within the palace. In Egyptian magical tradition, wax figures used in ritual contexts are documented across multiple periods as instruments intended to affect the individuals they represented. The papyrus does not claim these actions succeeded supernaturally, but it records that the conspirators believed they would. And in a civilization where divine authority was the foundation of all political power, the act of performing forbidden rituals against a living god was not merely a spiritual offense, it was treason. The conspiracy was now operating on 3 levels simultaneously: political, recruiting officials and military personnel; physical, planning direct action against the king; and supernatural, attempting to attack the pharaoh's divine protection itself. What happened next? The papyrus does not describe in detail, but the body of Ramesses III does. For nearly 3,000 years after the death of Ramesses III, scholars debated whether the conspiracy had actually succeeded. The ancient court records were frustratingly incomplete about the outcome. The official inscriptions said nothing about a murder. The king's mummy had been examined before, X-rayed in the 1960s, but the bandages around his neck were never removed. In 2012, a team of researchers published findings in the British Medical Journal based on a detailed CT examination of the royal mummy. What they found beneath those bandages had been hidden for 3,000 years. A deep transverse wound across the throat, severing the trachea, cutting through the major vessels of the neck, all the way to the bone. The researchers concluded this injury was fatal and almost certainly inflicted by a sharp blade. The embalmers packed the wound with linen during mummification. They carefully wrapped the neck before burial. Whether this was a standard part of body preparation or a desperate attempt to restore the king's appearance for the afterlife remains a topic of debate. For 3 millennia, It worked. The cause of death recorded in official documents was never murder. And now, the same CT examination revealed something else. The left big toe of Ramesses III was missing, severed by a sharp object, with no signs of bone healing, meaning it happened at or very near the time of death. The researchers note this may indicate a struggle or a second wound from the attack. The body of one of the last great pharaohs of Egypt told a story his own kingdom spent 3,000 years suppressing. Ramesses IV took the throne and moved immediately. Special courts were established. The judicial papyrus of Turin records 5 separate trials. Every name connected to the conspiracy was pursued. The punishments documented in the papyrus are precise. Some defendants were executed. Others, including officials who had known about the plot and said nothing, had their ears and noses cut off. The papyrus specifically records that 2 judges assigned to the case were themselves later punished for misconduct during the proceedings. Even the court convened to punish the conspiracy was not immune from corruption. Among the accused was Pentawa, the prince whose elevation had been the entire purpose of the plot. The papyrus states he was permitted to take his own life. Most historians interpret this as forced suicide, a punishment reserved for those of royal blood, sparing them public execution while ending them nonetheless. His body survived, but not with any royal dignity. Egyptologists discovered a mummy wrapped not in royal linen, but in what has been described as ritually impure material, consistent with deliberate degradation of burial status. In 2012, DNA analysis confirmed this mummy was closely related to Ramesses III. The researchers concluded he was almost certainly a son of the pharaoh. Most Egyptologists now identify him as Pentawa, buried without a name, without a tomb inscription, without an identity. For 3,000 years, he was catalogued only as Unknown Man E. The temples of Ramesses III still stand today. His mortuary temple at Medinet Habu, one of the best preserved in Egypt, records his military victories in extraordinary detail, his defeat of the Sea Peoples, his campaigns into Libya, his divine authority over the Nile. None of it mentions a strike by the workers who built his tomb. None of it mentions a conspiracy inside his own palace. None of it mentions a wound across his throat. Because the people who controlled the official record chose what survived. What we know today, we know because of documents they could not destroy. A damaged papyrus recording a workers' strike. A court record 18 feet long, buried long enough to be forgotten, and found at a market in the 1820s. A mummy wrapped tightly enough to preserve a wound for 3,000 years. This is how history actually works, not through what was recorded, but through what accidentally survived. One of the last great pharaohs of Egypt died at the center of a conspiracy inside his own household. The surviving records preserve only fragments, but those fragments reveal corruption, betrayal, violence at the highest levels of power. 3,000 years later, the evidence is still speaking. A murder hidden for 3,000 years, found not by historians, but by a CT scanner. If they could bury this, what else is still waiting beneath the sand? Subscribe to Erased Chronicles. Next video. A tomb was found in the Valley of the Kings. Every inscription inside had been deliberately destroyed. Every image of the person who owned it chiseled off the walls. Someone with enormous power tried to make this person never exist. We found out who and why.